All right, everybody, what's going on? How we doing? Today we are going to chat anything and everything Gen 3 Yola paddles. And so, first of all, I know that myself included have said Joola or Eula. It is Yola. So that is how we pronounce the name correctly. So, with that being said, let's dive right in. So, Jim and I were super fortunate enough to be invited to the Boston Pickleball Club opening party recently this past weekend, and we got the chance to try the Gen 3 Yola paddles. So, Boston Pickleball Club is a Yola authorized retailer, and they have all the paddles on demo currently. I'm sure if you go there or you're able to get in there, you'll get a chance to try some of them, if not all of them. So, real quick, in my video, I did not get the chance personally to hit with the Anabrite Scorpius 14 millimeter, the Ben Johns Perseus 14 millimeter, and the Hyperion 16 millimeter. I just want to make those disclaimers. I did, however, hit with the counterpart millimeter of each of those paddles, hitting with the Perseus 16 millimeter, hitting with the Scorpius, the Colin John Scorpius 16 millimeter, and hitting with the Ben Johns Hyperion 14 millimeter. With that being said, let's dive right in. So, real quick, first off, the first paddle I want to chat about is the Perseus. So, as I mentioned, we hit the Perseus 16 millimeter, and personally, for me, I did not like it. Here's a couple reasons why. It just felt very dead. It felt very, how do I put this correctly? Muted in not necessarily a bad way, but muted in more of like a power way. I just felt like there really wasn't a lot of benefit to the ball. It felt kind of clunky, slow in the hands. Um, and yeah, so I will also toss a disclaimer in that we were playing with a ball that was not a Franklin. I'll put it like that. We were playing with the Yola Primo ball, and it seemed like it was a little heavier, a little clunkier as well. So maybe with Franklin, this paddle does a lot better. Who knows? I'm looking forward to hopping in there and getting a chance to try it again with, other balls and other conditions, also being, outdoors as opposed to indoors. Those are all things that can affect how one likes and dislikes a paddle. With that being said, I know that that is Ben John's flagship paddle, so I'm sure a lot of people are still going to get it, regardless if we liked it or not, but we're just sharing our opinions and our thoughts on the paddle. So those are my thoughts personally. The one thing I did like is it had a nice handle, plenty of room for two-handed backhands, and that baby bluish color is really nice. I really like the colorway on it. I will say it's a bit much for the edge guard, but you can distinguish the paddle from a mile away as opposed to some of the other ones where you couldn't really tell as much. So the next thing we're going to move on to is the Gen 3 Colin Johns Scorpius paddle. So the Gen 3 Colin Johns Scorpius paddle was one of my favorites of the bunch, to say the least. I am a big fan of it's technically a standard shape, but the wide body shape in general. And for a multitude of reasons, I think the sweet spot's bigger. I think you get more out of the paddle. Yes, you are giving up a little bit of reach, but one thing I liked about this one is that it was actually 16 inches long in the face, as opposed to some of the more current popular wide bodies like the Valair Mach 2 Forza and the Groovin' Movin' that are about 15.7 to 15.8 to 9 inches long. And so that little extra bit does help on the face. I didn't feel like when I would go into reach or poach or reach in any ball that I was swinging and hitting the top of the paddle much, which is one of my few complaints with some of those other wide body paddles I've mentioned. So I really liked that. I will say right now, guys, the power on all of these paddles is ridiculous. They're extremely hot and extremely poppy. Um, with all of them, the only one I didn't feel that crazy power on, as I mentioned before, was the Perseus 16 millimeter. But the demo could have been a dud, or it could have been a little dead. I'm sure plenty of people have already hit with it. But going back to the Scorpius real quick here, plenty of room on the handle for two-handed backhands. Overall, was one of my favorite paddles. There really wasn't anything that it did wrong. It just felt amazing. Spin felt great, power felt great, pop felt great, and the weight felt great. We're in these without lead tape on. I'm gonna be honest, I don't even think I'd add lead tape to this if I were to pick it up right now. I'd definitely add an overgrip, but I don't think I'd add lead tape at the moment yet. I'd have to play with it more to experiment where I would like the lead tape for my personal setups. But yeah, so those are my thoughts on the Colin Johns 16 millimeter Scorpius. I'm now going to move to the Ben Johns Hyperion 14 millimeter. And this was a sleeper paddle for us. I really didn't think that I would care a ton for it. I will say this. I did play the 16 millimeter Hyperion, in that like late 2021, early 2022 when it came out time frame. Um, I played the I'm sorry, I might have the dates. That might be 2022, 2023. I'll check after the video on that. So apologies if I got the years wrong there. Um, but I actually really enjoyed this paddle. This was also one of my favorites of the test. And because it was maneuverable, the swing weight was relatively, not super heavy compared to the Perseus swing weight wise. The paddle itself felt good. The ball came off of it nicely and predictably, and it had that Gen 3 kapow, is what I'm going to call it, power. So I was a big fan of the Hyperion 14 millimeter. I am someone that is pretty tried and true 16 millimeter or thicker. I'll put it like this. I currently play a 16 millimeter paddle. I've pretty much only mained 16 millimeter paddles. There was a short period of time where I was pondering going to the Lux at a 20 millimeter, but I never ended up doing that. So yeah, it always surprises me when I like a 14 millimeter paddle every once, in a blue moon, but this was one of those scenarios. So I really liked that paddle. I was a fan. It really didn't do much wrong for me. I like the green edge guard, but it does blend in with the green courts a little. But thankfully, where we were hitting at Boston Pickle Club, it's got white walls, so that wasn't really a huge issue. And yeah, those are my thoughts on the Hyperion. Real quick as well, handle long enough for two hands. Same thing. I would toss an overgrip on pretty much all of these. But yeah, so we're now going to move it to the Tyson McGuffin Magnus paddle, the Albertus Magnus paddle. So, first of all, he's got that like baby pink to reddish color combo going on it, which it's nice. It's snazzy, it's smooth, it's poppy with looks. It's a very Tyson-esque color. I put it like that. Um, Honestly, this is the only paddle that had a handle that wasn't really long enough to hit two-handed backhands. You'd have to really choke up and force it with it. Um, but I actually really did like this paddle. It has the longer face, great pop. I thought it was the hottest of all of the paddles. I thought I could really plow through with this and the Hyperion, but in particular, this paddle. So with that being said, it was a little hard to control at times, but once you dial in with these Gen 3 paddles, it's a lot of fun. I will say this, I think that people are going to have to work on, hands and blocking and countering, and in particular, like tough resetting a lot with these paddles just because of how powerful and how poppy they are. But hopping more into the Tyson here, it is a 5-inch handle, so it's shorter than the other ones that are about, I think, around 5.5 inches handle wise, but you get that elongated, longer face, and it's actually a really nice feeling. I remember, picking it up at first, thinking I didn't really Wasn't really going to care much for the shape, all that, but it kind of reminds me of like the old Vatic V7 line from last year. It's a similar shape to those, and it ultimately is, it's a great paddle. It's a great power paddle, which is how I would classify all of these. They're all power paddles for sure. There is no one that's a control paddle, but I think they are more controllable than a lot of these reviewers have led on to, believe and think that they may or may not be. I didn't feel like I was necessarily spraying balls with any of them pretty much ever. I felt like I had good spin. Um, the Tyson was the only one where it would be occasionally spray, but it really wasn't that bad, compared to, something that these are being compared a lot to right now, the Gearbox Pro Power Elongated. I can go out with a broken in one of those and forget it. The ball's in the back fence half of the time, even just on like counters and blocks. So, yeah. So ultimately, I liked the Tyson as well. I really liked all of these except for the Perseus. That was the only one I really would not recommend to people. I could easily recommend all of these paddles in terms of playability, in terms of, yes, they will enhance your game. Do I think they're going to take a 3.5 to a 4.5? No. I think maybe a 3.5 with, I don't know, maybe a 4.0 plus drive and great hands could potentially move up to like a 4.0 with some of these paddles if they're playing well. But, just because it's a good paddle doesn't mean your game's suddenly going to jump a whole 1.0, decimal or more. With that being said, I do think they help though. I did want to do this at some point. I never got the chance to there, but I wanted to break out a wood paddle and like play and see the comparison and just how much faster these are as opposed to the old wood. So we'll have to do that if we pop by again or we get another chance with some of these. But yeah, so ultimately, those are my thoughts on the current Joola Gen 3 paddles. Again, I mentioned there was a few in there that I didn't get to hit, but for the most part, we got to hit the full library of them. And shout out to Boston Pickleball Club for letting us do that and hosting a wonderful event. All right. Thank you. Hey, real quick, everyone. I tossed in some of the gameplay footage of us just having a fun time with the paddles, really. I actually was hitting with probably one of the first people in Massachusetts I ever played pickleball with. So shout out to Ala. And Jim was hitting with a guy who we had just met at the event. I believe his name was Azon. I hope I'm saying that correct. Azon. Super nice guy. You know, and so yeah. So all right, guys. I hope you enjoy. All right. All right, let's go. Here we go. same ball twice. Very good.
That was out.
Right on the edge guard. The edge guard does not forgive on this.
Amazing.
Good ball. Are you 4 or 5?
Listen